Welcome to Seele Food. Seele is the German word for soul, so soul food, but Seele food. This podcast is in conjunction with Seele Magazine, an online magazine bridging faith, cultures, and culture. I'm Allie Forti, an American Southern girl who travels and loves talking to people. I'm bringing you conversations from global movers and shakers from somewhere in the world. From these conversations, hopefully you'll be inspired to move and shake too. Thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you get fed, so let's begin. So, Rebecca Mazai, an awesome contributor to Seele, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Lara Taganavalu, known as Lara Toggs, one recent Saturday morning. Lara is the daughter of Brian and Bobby Houston, the founders of Hillsong Church, a church that touches every continent except Antarctica, in numerous cities with several services in each city each Sunday. Not to mention all of the programs and ministries that Hillsong has. So between three continents, Australia, North America, and Europe, I was in Paris, Laura was in Sydney, and Rebecca was in Vancouver, spread out over 3 different time zones. The three of us chatted for an hour about biblical womanhood, music, knowing to run from a bad relationship, Lara's initiative, The Secret Garden, this space designed to reach and inspire young women by compelling them to dig deeper into the things that consume their hearts. We talked about social media. We talked about people feeling hurt by the church and who opt to stay home. We talked about how she handles and has handled criticism from those around the world who are critical of Hillsong Church, and just sitting at the feet of Jesus and what that means. It was like this awesome packed hour where the three of us just poured into each other. Laura and her husband Peter are global pastors of Hillsong's Young and Free, and they're also very prolific speakers. I've had the pleasure of hearing them both speak from the stage, and they're really gifted in that, and it's rooted in a love for the Lord and sharing the Lord with this generation that God has put them in. And together they pastor the youth ministry for Hillsong Church. They're passionate about seeing a young and free movement rise up across the earth and finding true life and joy and freedom through knowing Christ. They want people to know Christ. And as well as youth pastoring, they seek to give a voice to this generation by leading Hillsong's Young and Free worship team, which is a collective of young people using their God-given talents to glorify God. So this is really an awesome packed chat, like this round table discussion that we had with Laura. Laura is mama to Willow, Jack, and her new baby, Lola Monday. The 2 older ones, you'll hear them running around in the background. And it's nice. It's a nice sound of motherhood and family in the background of our discussion. So be revived with with our 3 English-speaking accents, and be encouraged. Lara really poured in with her time and her wisdom, and I'm really grateful that she was able to join the podcast. So be encouraged. Women have a different set of goals in 2020 than they did, I would say, 100 years ago in 1920. And we're working, trying to reach goals in our career, starting businesses, traveling more, marrying later, having fewer kids, and or starting a family later. And like your thoughts, how do we as women find balance in career, marriage, children, and friendships?
Okay, good question. Well, first of all, I probably am not your typical 2020 girl because I started very young. I met my husband when we were just kids, and we started dating when I was 19, he was 20, and then we got married when I was 21, and he was 22, and then started having kids at 23. So I feel like I got a little bit of I guess a head start on things, but yeah, but for me, I think I've always felt like I just wanted to do it all, and I always have kind of tried to do everything that's within my hand and within my heart to do. And I feel like if you're passionate and you have a sense of purpose about what you do, then you find ways and you get inventive to make things work. and so from the in the beginning, I think, I was trying to like give equal amounts of attention to most things. Now, as I've gotten a little bit older, I've realized that you can't really do that. Like, you're never going to be able to give like, the equal amount of attention to work as you do your family or whatever. But I just find that if I'm present wherever I'm at in the moment, that's how I'm most effective. And so for me, if I'm with my kids, then I'm just going to choose to be there 100%. If I'm in a meeting, then I'm going to choose to be there 100%. As I'm on this call, I'm going to try my best to be in this moment as best I can. And that's how I feel like you can be most effective in this day and age, when as women, we're trying to do and have it all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really some good advice, to be present wherever you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to give it your all when you are there.
I love that.
Yeah.
I especially love that you said you make it a point to be inventive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so, because I think it takes creativity to make all the pieces work and come together, and sometimes you have to actually switch on your mind. And I think that's what women do so well, actually, is that I think we tend to make things that are quite complicated. I think we tend to make things look simple in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's part of how God created us, and I think that's why God created us with so much more like capacity to do things like have children, and like and yet do things that are worthwhile in our careers or whatever it might be. So I think I think that we're just have been waiting for permission. Really, that's all it is.
Yeah, to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something how us women feel we have to get permission first before we can move into a thing. Men don't seem to struggle in the same way.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, but the times, they are definitely changing, and I just see strong women rising up. And for me, that was never even it wasn't really a foreign concept for me personally, because I've grown up in an environment where women have been so empowered, and there's always been women who have held key leadership positions, and
Right.
While having family and while having children and raising kids up, and just I've had so many role models in that sense that for me it didn't feel like this like crazy thing. I guess I've never felt that sense of oppression as a woman. I feel the challenges now as I grow older and I have more responsibility. But yeah, it's cool that for me, I've had so many women who are further along in the journey, like my mom and like other women in our church and so on, who have really paved the way.
I can, like your mom having her children and then building up Hillsong, that must have been like a sight to see. And then that's all you know. And you just went out there and did that for your own life. Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing. I think it's a mix when I look at women in the church today. Either some are still doing the career thing and just blazing through, excuse me, or some will kind of step back from career and all the things that they were doing before they got a family or got married. So I guess it depends on the woman, but I think it's possible
Totally.
to do it. It's possible to do it all at different times in your life and just try to be present as you can in what you're doing.
That's right. And I think it comes down to, again, like your personal conviction and your sense of purpose and your passion for it. I think that it has to be personal, and it has to be something that you really feel from the inside that's going to fuel you to do what you need to do. And if you don't have that, I was talking to a really beautiful friend of mine who's a guy, and he's married to this incredible woman who, she's been raising their kids, and that's been her life for the last 10 years. And he was saying of her that she's had this little, like, almost like this little crisis in her life where she just has felt like, oh, maybe she should have done more. Like maybe she should have had this little side hustle going on and this little business thing because that's what everybody else is doing. But I think that we need to, we can't really put the same, the same thing that I have. I can't put that expectation on other women. I think we're all just doing our own thing. We're all, running our own race. And I think if you keep your eyes in your lane and don't, cheer each other on in one another's lane, but we don't have to be running the same race. It looks differently for everybody. And, I think my friends who have chosen to be full-time mom over the last few years, that's amazing. And I think that's the most difficult job in the world, the hardest job in the world for sure. So I think everybody and every woman is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just doing what God's will for your life, and then you'll be fine. Yeah. Okay, Rebecca, pass it on to you for the next question.
Thanks, Allie. So, Laura, I recently read about the vision in which Hillsong was birthed. And I read that Hillsong was uniquely birthed through a concept that music should be the collective that joins people of all demographics together. And I thought, what a powerful vision. And from someone who's been impacted by worship, and I've been involved in worship ministry, I was really taken by the fact that music is the common language that speaks to every heart. And to see how it unfolded uniquely for Hillsong, whereby God has literally exposed the sound waves of different styles of music to the nations, is even more powerful. So can you explain to us how you continued that vision and implemented it to the young and free generation that you and your husband pioneered?
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, music is so powerful, and I think, our church has been around now, Hillsong Church, for the last probably 35 years or plus. And right from the outset, music and praise and worship has been such a huge part of the vision and the mandate upon our church. And it's really it's like an anointing. It's a mantle that's upon our house to create praise and worship that would, bless the body of Christ. And it's by the grace of God for sure. And so for my husband and I, when we became youth pastors about close to a decade ago now, I know, I'm getting old.
No, you're like
But
wine.
you know,
You're getting finer with time. That's what my mom said.
amen.
Yeah.
Amen. No, when we started out as youth pastors, we really sensed like God was stirring something within us, that He wanted to do something new amongst our youth and amongst our young people, and that He wanted to give, our their own sense of identity.
Yeah.
As you guys probably know, like a huge part of our church and our music, our praise and worship has been Hillsong United, which
Yeah.
was birthed out of our youth ministry, and for a long time that was the identity of our youth. But at the time that we took over, really those guys had evolved past our youth. They weren't, necessarily attending youth on our Friday nights when we hold our programs, and they were traveling the world and just making waves across the earth. It's so incredible what's taken place with Hillsong United. And so we really sensed like God was saying, I'm doing something new. It's not what's been done before. It's not going to look like what's been done before. It's not going to sound like what's been done before. And to us, it's a little bit of a no-brainer. Like, we know, like, God has placed this mantle upon our church, and it's not an anointing that's just with one person. It's upon the house. It's upon the church. And so, we knew music is such a big part of it. And so, so the first thing was, okay, we're going to give this thing, our youth, a name. And at the time, Young and Free was just like a theme that we had over our year. But it just kind of became like the name of our youth ministry. And then we put the call out for, our regular young people who were just serving at our youth programs. And, at the time we didn't really realize just how special the gifting and the talent that was upon them. But God just totally breathed His Spirit upon it. And it's amazing that, when God is on it and when He breathes on something, the right people rise up. And we've just found that, God has surrounded us with these incredible young people who not only are extremely gifted and talented, but they really love Jesus, and they live to serve Him and serve young people. And so it's been probably a 6-7 year journey now of Young and Free, kind of, to be honest, filling a bit of a gap. Because, when I looked out there a few years ago, I realized there wasn't actually much to offer young people within the church, which is really surprising. But there was a gap there, and so I was even saying to our team yesterday, like, we can't underestimate the responsibility that we have, and the platform that we have to be a voice for young people within the body of Christ upon the earth right now. It's a huge, huge honor, and it's really like this, it's almost like it's like a burden, but what I feel like is like the burden is light. It's like this thing that God's just kind of like, His Spirit's breathing upon it, and we can't explain what's happening, but it's really exciting, and we love that we're a part of it.
That is so amazing. And it's so encouraging to hear. Really, just the response is, it's great, because it's that one step of obedience. It was that heaviness within your spirit that you had, but then the obedience is what you carried out. And this is essentially what was birthed with, steps of faith. And to see how it's just been expanded because God's hand was in it is beautiful.
Yeah, no, you're right. And for us, we know these young people, we know like that they're just these regular kids who have grown up in the suburbs of Sydney, Australia. And the fact that they can put pen to paper and out of their spirit, write these songs that are now, resonating across the earth, and that seem like, are, that young people seem to be really receptive of it, is just it's mind-blowing to us. Like,
Yeah.
it can only be God, you know?
Yeah, agreed.
I,
That's awesome.
I would say the youth can be often one of the most forgotten groups in the world, or in a church, in a group, and we forget that they have needs and they need ministry too, but they also have so much to give. And I spent 6 months in London in 2017, and I was going to Hillsong London, and I was amazed what Dan Blythe and Charlie Blythe have built up. I'd never
Mm.
seen a youth program like that. Although I went to the largest church, I grew up in the largest church in South Carolina, and there was a sizable youth department, but I was amazed at how they really get in there. And all that's coming from the leadership of Kathy Clark and Gary.
Mm.
And then that's coming from your parents and their leadership.
Right.
And I've been living the last year and a half in Beirut, Lebanon, working with Syrian refugees and going out into the camps, and with like a Christian organization, Horizons International. They try and put a little program together, but you've got 2-year-olds to teenagers, and you can't mix them together,
Mm.
but you do what you can with what you have. And seeing the young
Yeah.
teenage boys, they're not wanting to stand there doing music time. And then Syrian refugees just have a host of problems. Anyways, they've never sat in a classroom. There's discipline area issues, and I'm trying to talk to them, and language barriers. But I messaged Dan Blythe, and I said, Dan, what you have for your young men, I wish you could know how blessed your young men in London are, because there are some
Mm.
young men who are youth age walking around in parts of the world who don't have male men to look up to, godly men to look up to.
Mm.
And I just wish that for these refugees, or for poor young youth men around the world, because young youth men and the women, they need, the men need, the kids need men to look up to, and the girls need women to look up to. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I immediately thought of Hillsong London, of what
Right.
do with Young and Free, because it's amazing. When you get in there and start working with youth, it can transform their lives, and God can do amazing things.
Yeah.
So if
And
you,
I think, at the end of the day, I've realized that every living soul really wants the same thing. They want to have value placed upon them. They want to be encouraged. They want a sense of belonging. They want to feel safe and like they are a part of something greater than themselves. And so no matter where you are, whether you're in Sydney or in the USA or in Europe or, in Syria, my goodness, like I feel like really at the end of the day, like that like your secret weapon is the fact that you can like speak life into people and speak encouragement into people, and they're always going to respond to that.
yeah, that's true when they have the right leadership. But that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so jumping back about to like godly women, a question I've got, and I've struggled with this myself. Any thoughts for the godly woman who thinks she's more effective being single, thinking that a husband or children can hold her back?
I feel like women, whatever path they choose or that they find themselves in, I think you can be effective wherever you are, and so in terms of like whether they're choosing that because they think that they're going to be more effective there, then I think that's really a woman's own choice, and there's no judgment from me in that. I think it just, like I said, I think it just comes down to your personal conviction and wherever you find yourself. And I always feel like when I'm talking to single girls,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to encourage them, like, just don't wait until you feel like, you find, the man that you're supposed to marry and you start a family and that's when life begins. It's just not the way that it is. Like, I think that God, like, has so much for us, in every season, including when you're single. And I think make the most of it. There's so many things that in reality I would love to be doing, but I don't, and because I just can't, like, practically I can't, because I have a family, and that's part of, my priority. And I'm not complaining about it. It's just the reality. Right now we have our Young and Free team who are traveling and they're on the road and they're doing amazing things, and I'm not with them. I'm at home because I'm choosing to be with my family. Whereas if I didn't have my family, that's where I would be. And
Right.
I try not to think that way, but I just think, like, if you're in that season of being single, then make the most of it. There's this lyric in one of our songs that my brother wrote, actually, and it says, "While I'm waiting, I'm not waiting."
Oh,
And
yeah.
I just love that, because I think, maybe you see yourself with a husband and with kids and with a family in the future, or, whether it's your career that you haven't really, found yourself in yet, but it's in the future. Like, while you're waiting for that, just choose, I'm not actually going to wait. I'm going to make the most of where I'm at right now. And as you do that, like, along the way, like, all of a sudden God brings the right pieces together. And then, but, if a woman chooses that that's the way that she wants to be single, and she wants to make the most of, whether it's study or career or whatever, then that's her choice, I think. So, and that's her prerogative as well.
Yeah, yeah. And if I guess marriage is meant and family is meant for someone, then God will prepare their hearts for that. And
And I think there's enough women who are kicking goals, who have families and have strong marriages and so on, for us, for others to look towards and go, oh, it is possible, So, yeah.
Gotcha. Wonderful. Okay, Rebecca, on to you.
Well, my question has to do with social media. And so social media is a challenge for women, but for all people, really, because it breeds comparison and jealousy and unhappiness. So, any advice on how we should be thinking of social media to be used as a tool instead of being subjugated by it? Because I really think that this has become a very dominant issue in society.
I mean, you only have to look at the stats and
Right.
have a conversation with your friends and your family to realize that it has a huge impact on mental health, on your soul, on even just, we talked before about being present with the ones that you love. Like it's just a competing factor for so many people and in so many various ways. I think that when it comes to social media, it's not the enemy, because it's part of the world that we live in. And so I think, as soon as we try and kick back or fight against it, we're becoming irrelevant, because it is what it is. It's part of our culture. And so I feel like we can't treat it as the enemy. We have to just learn how to use it with wisdom. And so, I think the biggest thing is just, being aware. I think being self-aware is really important. I know for myself, I know that, if I feel like, there's certain accounts that are going to, trigger that sense of comparison, or if, there are things that I just feel like are depleting to my soul and my internal being, then I just feel like you have to draw the line and make some choices and realize that it's actually not worth it. It's not worth it for your soul's health and well-being. And I'm all for, like, it actually has a detrimental impact on who you are and your well-being, then I'm all for just saying, you know what, just get off it. Like you don't have to be on social media.
Yeah.
It's, it's not a requirement for us to do it. And I know that there's some people who have, they've had to really battle things like depression and anxiety and so on, and that social media has such a massive part in that, and they've just had to get rid of it, or, even if it's not permanently, but for a time being, they just have to get rid of it. And I'm all for it. I think, do what you need to do. But I think if we can learn, as a church, as leaders, to use it to inspire others and to encourage others, then I think that's us being good stewards of this world that we live in and how it's progressing. Even with our kids, my daughter is 9, and she's just started to show interest in Instagram and TikTok and so on, and she doesn't really have accounts yet, but I'm thinking now, I'm in a position where I'm thinking, hey, how am I going to raise my daughter in this world that we're living in, and how am I going to resource her with the type of wisdom that she will need to navigate a social media world. And I think that's the things that we need to think through, especially for the next generation. And I love that, like, for us in Australia, I think it's the same in Canada, that they've taken away the amount of likes, so you can't see how many likes a photo gets on Instagram.
Yeah.
And for me, that's really encouraging that that Instagram would do that, because I remember when I was in high school, thinking, like, do people like me, like, without there being like an actual, metric system that's actually like literally saying, this is how many people like you, this is how many people follow you. You know what I mean? Like, that was, it's crazy.
And then to think of the pettiness behind that too. It's just like, really?
Totally.
How petty are we becoming?
Yeah, totally. So for me, I'm encouraged that, like, at least, the creators and people who are running these huge, networks are at least, putting some things that are hopefully going to help our kids in the future.
Yeah. And I'm even an advocate for, I, made the decision to really take a step back from social media. So there was about a period of 3 months where I wasn't posting anything. I wasn't going on there, wasn't reading anything, only because I wanted to refocus my prayer life and my devotional life. And I felt like social media was a distraction. And then when I slowly started to reintroduce it, I just realized that my perspective had completely changed. And I was really starting to second guess, well, why am I going to post this? What does it lend itself? And what kind of messaging is it going to lend? And so now my whole thought process is, if it's not going to edify, if it's not going to encourage, and if it's going to, perhaps bring someone low in spirit, then forget it. I'm not even going to bother posting it. So yeah, it's just those kinds of thoughts that I'm just really trying to be super intentional about what I post.
That's great. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to try and implement with young girls, especially because I feel like there's like this threat against comparison constantly with them.
Yeah, totally. And as a youth pastor, I'm like around teenage girls and young adults a lot. Sorry, my kids are in the background. I don't know what they're doing. But one thing I've realized is that they tend to not be as consumed or concerned by social media than I am. And I think, I read about this. I think it's because they are what are called digital natives. So they have been born into this world where they don't know anything different. Like, this is just the world that they live in. It's their normal. Whereas for us, like, it's because it's been introduced and we remember what life was like before it. We find ourselves more, like, just more conscious, I guess, of it. And so, but I just find, like, with these young girls, like, they don't post very much. They're on it, but they're not, like, consumed by it, which is really encouraging. I think so. I think, if we can keep on just, pointing people towards Jesus and encouraging things. Like, I just have been thinking, in line with what you were saying before about the power of just quiet time. I remember being a young person and having youth leaders in my life who just said, "Oh, how are your quiet times going?" And that was a question that I would get asked on a regular basis, and it would encourage me to have that time where I would shut off from everything else so that I could hear the voice of God, and I could read the Word, and I could be in prayer and so on. And I've just been, like, reminded, like, that's something that I need to encourage in this next generation is, like, actually, are you shutting off from the noise? Like, how is your quiet time? Like, let's not underestimate the power of peace and quiet and how God speaks to us in those moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Being a fashion journalist, and a whole week of fashion shows are getting ready to start up, and it can be exciting that you're at the Valentino or Dior show, and then you've got this 18-year-old or 16-year-old influencer in front of you, and the cameras are ticking off. And I think for the influencer, that's whether they're 18 or closer to my age in their 30s, especially closer to my age, like what you were saying before, it can mess with your head that you're in this rat race and how many likes did I get? And it can really just affect you. And it's very important not to get caught up into that, because that's the worldliness of it. And it's a hard thing to do, but then we have to get to the quiet time to quiet our minds when we start comparing. And if your job is in that entertainment industry, you have to have a lot of quiet times.
And you know what? I genuinely don't know many girls who are in that industry, especially influencers on social media, who are like, who don't struggle with those things. You know, it's such a interesting world to be a part of, because, according to their pictures, they're getting, they're in all the great places, and they're getting the best of the best, and they've got, the best labels that they're wearing and they're endorsing and all these things, all these perks and so on. But, I think it's exhausting for them. And it just goes to show that really all the temporary things just don't do it.
It's true.
Don't. Yeah. They definitely don't. Okay, quickly moving on. I've recently had conversations with Christians from Lebanon to African nations and in the West that people are feeling the church is starting to feel more like a business and not really there to help people in their burdens, and that they don't feel the church is looking like the church in Acts, and that it's not like a family. And some are starting to stay home, which I find quite sad, and they're staying away from church community. Any advice on how to tackle this issue where you're chatting with your friends and they've started staying home from church because they feel this way?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously are a part of a really large charismatic church, and one thing that my dad has always said right from the beginning when we started to grow numerically, he said, well, if we're becoming a big church, we need to work out how to make a big church feel small. And, because he refused to not feel like family. He's like, I do not want to pastor a crowd. I want to pastor a family. And I think that's what it comes down to with church, is that we need to work out how to build that sense of community, so that anybody who walks through the door has a sense of welcome, who feels like they're seen, like value has been placed upon their life. And that we're not just speaking to their Sunday, but we're speaking to their Monday, that we're aware of, like, not just in this bubble of church life, but we realize that, the world, there's this huge world that exists beyond the four walls of our church and our church buildings. And so we need to speak into the people of our church who are out infiltrating the earth, who are in all the different spheres. And so I think it's really important just to stay aware of what's going on in the world, what's happening in business and in finance and in sports and entertainment and all these different spheres, so that everybody, no matter where they're at, feels that sense of value. And we could speak biblical truth into the times that we're living in. And I think young people and millennials, I just have this sneaking suspicion that, that people are going to come around full circle, and they're going to realize that we can try and be innovative with how we do church and how we build communities and stuff. But I think at the end of the day, that face-to-face connection, nothing beats it. The sense of like interaction and touch, like even just being able to give someone a hug is so powerful. To look in somebody's eyes and ask them, like, how are you doing? Are you okay? How was your week? People crave that. And to worship together, there's nothing like being in the room and being amongst one another. And so, I think for us, we just feel this real sense of like being faithful to what God has placed in our hearts, in how to build church. And I feel like around the world, like you just have to be faithful to how you feel God is leading you, but to remember that people just really want to belong. They want to belong to things and to families and friendships and community. And so
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, Rebecca.
Well, my question actually has to do with dating. And so just in recent months and conversations that I've had with young women, I've become quite amazed at the number of men and women in church who are active in the church, but sometimes playing with, other people's feelings when it comes to dating or courtship. And so what would you say is the best advice for letting the Holy Spirit guide a woman, especially in discerning a man's intentions? What should women be looking for in a godly partner, and really identifying some of the things that should be prompting them away from a relationship rather than to pursue one? And so, for example, how did you know your husband Peter was the right man for you when you met him?
Yeah. Well, we were very young, and in hindsight, I think, oh my gosh, I was crazy. What did I know getting married at 21? I'm like a kid. But I'm actually so grateful, because he's a really good man. And for me, I just, as a young girl, I obviously, I was attracted to guys growing up, and some of them were okay, and some of them were just not great humans. And they were all, active in church life. And I realized as a young girl that just because someone may call themselves a Christian or identify as a Christian, it doesn't mean that they are a man or a woman of God.
Right.
And so for me, what really drew me to my husband P was that he was just a really godly man, that he was really active in church life, that he involved himself. He was serving in our church. He wasn't, dating a whole lot of girls. In fact, I'd never seen him with another girl before. And he was just a really consistent guy who was always there. He was just always there. And so he wasn't disappearing. He wasn't, I feel like something that is common that I hear in kind of the courtship kind of relationships now is that they'll be there and then they'll disappear for a while and then they'll come back when it seems convenient to them. Whereas I feel like, a trait of a really good guy and a good godly guy is that they're just consistent and they're not playing with your heart or your head and your emotions. And so I also think that that any kind of relationship should be in the light and not in the dark. And I think that another thing that I kind of have observed in relationships is that a lot of people want to kind of date in secret.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's healthy. And that's why I think as the church and belonging to healthy community, I feel like we can't put too much pressure on people when they're dating. Because when you do that, or you make fun of them in public, or you kind of go, oh, what's this? Like, what's this going on with this person? It kind of encourages them to do things in secret as opposed to keep it in the light. Because when anything that's in the dark, that's where, things go down. Yeah. That's where, sin abounds. That's where the enemy, if he's going to have his way, he's going to have his way in the dark, in secret. And so I just encourage people, you know what, there's no pressure in your dating. It doesn't need to work out. It doesn't mean that you need to marry one another, but keep it in the light. Like make sure the right people know about it, and that you're not doing things by yourselves in the secret, because it's actually so toxic. And I've seen great people who have ended up in a really unhealthy relationship because they didn't do their relationship in the light, and so that's a huge piece of advice for me. And I think if you're in a relationship where the guy doesn't want to tell people,
Run.
That's
Run.
a huge red flag. And a huge red flag. If he wants to keep it secret, then I'm like, run, because it's that doesn't seem healthy to me. And I think, I think if you know your worth and your value as a woman, you know what you're worth, and you won't give people discounts. And so that's, I say for all girls, like, dig deep into God, like, know who you are as a daughter of God. Yes. Because if you can find your identity there, your sense of value and worth from being a daughter of God, or a daughter of the King, then you'll know when you're not being treated as you should be.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. You have to know who you are in Jesus before you start dating people, because then you're going to be going in and out of relationships and you're wondering why it's not working. And men will come in and tell you all kind of things. And if you don't have the know-how, and you've never dated before, and you don't kind of know how men work. Women we have our issues too, but I think I wish my mom would have prepared me better for that. Taught me things, said things to me more, because my first boyfriend, he wasn't a Christian. I wasn't born again. And it was a lot of that, keeping it secret, really taking me around other people, lots of other things. And I just accepted it. You will begin to accept it as a woman, thinking,
Yeah.
oh, this is
Yeah.
the best I can get, which is a lie.
Yeah.
And then you're losing 20 pounds and not seeing your friends
Yeah.
and not going to church as much. Yeah. So knowing
Yeah. And I think as soon as you feel like you're being, isolated, or that you're isolating yourself, that's another thing that you just need to, we're not supposed to be isolated. We're supposed to, be, you know, unified and amongst one another. And so yeah, I know there's so many things that unfortunately you just have to learn along the way. And that's why I always encourage people, like, actually do life with the Holy Spirit.
yeah.
Like you have to walk step by step with the Holy Spirit, because if you're being led, directed and guided by the Spirit, then he's so faithful, and he's our helper and he's our friend. And so that's why we need to align ourselves so that we will know, okay, this is not quite right. Like this is, and we have to pay attention to that and not ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can silence the voice of the Holy Spirit when it's not what we want.
Yeah.
But I would just say, don't ignore those red flags, because that often is the Holy Spirit who's being faithful and loyal to us and helping us out. So
That's so true. Okay, we could probably spend all day talking on this, or having a girls' conference just on these themes. But moving right along, you got this really great initiative with the Secret Garden, and I remember at Color 2017, and especially the girl that you brought. I think she's from Australia as well, and she's from Middle Eastern descent. And I just remember the line where she's like, when she came to know herself in Jesus, and she's like, I have the nose of Ruth, and
oh
she
yeah.
her, the beautiful mark that God has given Middle Eastern women. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so you have the Secret Garden, which is encouraging women and the beauty that God has created them to have. How did that come about?
Well, honestly, I was on my way to Bali um, for a little time away with my husband for our 7-year anniversary, I think it was. And I picked up my mum's sisterhood book because I hadn't read it, and I read it from start to finish in one sitting on one flight. And honestly, I wept through the whole thing because it just reminded me of so much of my childhood. And, there are so many memories that are attached to the words that she wrote in that book. But also, I just felt like this prompting, like I've got this legacy, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and inheritance. And at the same time, I'm leading all these young people. And really, I knew within myself that I wasn't doing as much as I felt like I could be or should be for the girls.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really over the process of that week that I just began to dream up what the Secret Garden is. And I had thought about starting a blog, before, but I didn't feel like it was right. Like, I love fashion, but I didn't feel like I was supposed to do a fashion blog. I love music. I love all these things. I love, beauty and all of those things. I love them. There's nothing wrong with that. I just didn't feel like that was what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then, as I was thinking about what the Secret Garden could be, I really felt like I wanted to put an emphasis on the things of our heart, and not just what's external, but what's internal, and that it always begins from the inside out. We have to tend to what's within, and we can put so much focus and priority on how our hair looks, and that we've got the best skincare regime, and that we are, have got the best clothes and all those sorts of things, all the things that I love. I truly love it. But it does not matter if you're not tending to what's within. And at the end of the day, when nobody else is looking, when you've posted all that you can to Instagram, and you are just left alone, and it's just you. Hello, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry. When it's just you and you're by yourself, like really, like that's when like that what's within the heart and how your soul realm is, and the condition of your mind, like that's really what's most important. And so for me, it was really just creating content that wasn't just going to be content for the sake of it, that wasn't just going to be more content to add to the content crazed world that we're living in, but it was going to be things that really compelled girls to tend to what's within. And that's why I call it the secret garden, because it's the perfect metaphor for really like watering your soul and giving priority to that. And for me, I love creativity. I love aesthetics. And so for me, I was like, okay, well, it has to look beautiful and it has to be really cool, because I want to capture the attention of girls. I want them to first get a glance, catch a glimpse of something that looks great, but really just to tap it, to click in, and only be a couple of clicks away to realize that there's so much more depth to this. So, yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Rebecca?
So my question is also about the secret garden. And to me, the secret garden is breaking ground for women in ministry to lead the way for healthy, whole, judgment-free conversations. What would you say is the common denominator or the common thread that women struggle with the most that prevent them from opening up with other women? And for women in ministry currently who are leaders or upcoming leaders and wish to build something similar in nature whereby it's a safely guarded community for women, what principles or tools would you recommend for them firstly to build it on solid, whole foundation?
Yeah. Well, I think, there were some key words that you used there. I think creating a safe place for women to be vulnerable. I think vulnerability is something that it's beautiful, and it's very tender, and it creates a way for other women to feel like they are understood and that they're not alone. And so when you create a safe place where women can come and they can actually, let their guard down and speak into some of the things that have been challenges for them, then it's really powerful. And especially if for me, I've always been really intentional to make sure that it comes from a place of, even if we're still going through it, we haven't won the battle yet, but we are still overcoming and overcomers. So it's not this like, we're all broken people. Yes, we are all broken people, but also we're overcomers. And so that's been really important. But in terms of like common themes, I think sense of like just that kind of like sense of value and esteem and image has been it's been really common, and being I guess encouraged and accepted by others. It's all those things that we can all identify with, no matter what. And so you mentioned Hoover before, and she's from Afghanistan and came to Australia when she was barely a teenager and, didn't know English, and she looked different to the other girls. And so for her, she felt she was bullied, and it's the same thing for, the Australian girl who is so beautiful, but she didn't believe it, she didn't know it, and struggled with eating disorders. It's like, there's just this kind of common theme of like just, I guess, understanding your value and your worth. And for me, that's the sisterhood message that, I've grown up in, and that my mum, has been really, really faithful to that God whisper where it says, tell them that, heaven believes in them. Because I think really girls everywhere, they want to be believed in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Wow. It's amazing that God put that on your heart, and then you made it into something, and it's obedience. And then that whole arena in London was blessed by it. And then I still remember that line. And then it made me think, being African American, we have maybe wider noses or larger lips, but maybe that's the nose and lips of the Queen of Sheba. And Rebecca, who's
beautiful, yeah,
descent, she's got features of, a Roman woman, maybe the wife of, although he was quite arrogant, the wife of, you remember when Jesus was on trial, and what was his name? Pilate. But yeah, Jesus had to go before Pilate, and the woman who had a very strong spiritual, don't crucify Jesus. But she's a Roman woman, and maybe Rebecca has the features of her, and we have to learn, and that goes back to knowing your identity in Jesus. And
come on, yeah, that's it.
The Chinese Asian women changing their eye shapes, I'm like, no, that's God is giving you that beautiful feature. And Arab women in the Middle East, you just see them walking around with the white strip over their nose because they want everyone to see they had the rhinoplasty. So
Wow.
Okay, so the last two quick questions, and I really want to get this one in. Do you know Julie Galanti at Hillsong London? She's really an awesome.
Of course.
I remember she said in a Bible study one time that the soil that Hillsong is planted in is healthy. It is good, and I do believe that in my heart. And I've ran across so many people who can be critical of Hillsong, but I think that people don't understand the anointing that God has graced the church and the Houston family. And it could be so easy for people to criticize and to say that Hillsong is this or that or whatever, everything that's been said. My question is how do you handle the stress and criticisms? And I think, a lot of people just don't understand the mantle that's on the Houston family. Like, what is it that we don't understand? And how do you respond to everything that your family has received?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like I don't know, I feel like God kind of maybe protected me growing up from a lot of the criticism that we used to get, especially from the media. When I was in high school, that's when the media were really unfair to our family and to our church, and it was really bad. But I think I never felt this sense of like angst or anxiety about it. And I really do feel like that God was really kind and that he protected me from it. Mm-hmm. And I even remember I turned up to school one day and there was all these signs that someone had posted on the hallway, that these huge signs saying, Hillsong, where does your money go? Like, and in hindsight, I think back, I'm like, that's a really traumatizing thing for a young girl to go through. But at the time, I actually was not rocked by it at all. And I think, wow, God, you so graced me growing up. I think if that happened now, I think I would be really shook. But but I think for me, from a really early age, I just chose to not engage in a lot of it. If there were things, if there were articles written about church, about our family, I wouldn't read them. If there were forums, I would stay away online because they are just pure evil. I think, if arguments broke out or debates broke out at school, I would, just spend the minimal amount before graciously excusing myself because I wasn't really looking for attention. I wasn't really interested in it. And for me, I feel like for our family, we just get on doing what we feel like God has called us to do. And I think that's part of perhaps why we've been able to sustain and to move forward is because we're not going to let the voices of some, and the opinions and the misunderstandings of others get underneath our skin. We're just going to get on with what God's called us to do. And when you have that strong sense of vision, the strong sense of purpose, and like God has he's called us to be part of the solution on the earth right now, to build the church, then you don't really have time to be bothered by the voices of others. And so I think that's part of it. I think that I think that there's this side of God's grace that's just really just been upon us to not be completely ignorant to it, but just to not be fazed by it. And then there's this other side of us we're just so driven by what God's called us to do that we just keep on pressing on. And for the most part, for every negative voice that there is out there, for every person who criticizes or has some sort of opinion, there are so many more people who truly are just kind people. They may not even attend our church. They may not even be followers of Jesus, but they see that, we're good people and that the people of our church are good people. They're everyday people who are just doing life the best that they can and trying to serve God. And they can appreciate and respect that. And we feel that, on the streets and in restaurants or so on, we meet people every day. And, my dad says that often he'll get people who say to them, I don't believe in what you believe, but I really like what you say. And I just think that's cool, that they can even be encouraged by his sermons and so on, even if they're not fully aligned with Jesus at this point. So,
shining a light and planting a seed and changing this idea of what Christians are supposed to be.
Yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. Okay, so this is the last question. It's a fun question, a quick question. And my mom said, if you get the chance to ask her, I'd love to know, besides your mom, what woman from the Bible would you choose to be your mentor and why?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I really have always loved Mary, who sat at the feet of Jesus, because I feel like, for me, if there's one thing that I feel like is my, how David had his one thing, he says in Psalm 27, one thing I desire of the Lord, this is what I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. That was his one thing. I've often asked myself, okay, what's my one thing? And I feel like my one thing is to abide in Jesus, is just to stay in his presence. And what I love about Mary is that she chose to sit at the feet of Jesus. And when Martha kind of was caused a little bit of a what about me? Here I am in the kitchen, preparing for you and doing things for you. Jesus said, well, Mary has chosen what is better, and that is to just sit at my feet. And so I think that's what I want my life to be, is just for my posture to be sitting at the feet of Jesus, and to be just being in his presence, not just doing things for him and getting busy doing things for him, but actually just being a daughter of the King and being in his presence.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome.
It really is a good reminder for us all. Yeah. Just to sit and take in.
Yeah, that's it.
It is.
Amen.
Oh, Laura, thank you so very much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. Of course. Yeah.
And for
It's
trusting.
a privilege. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. God bless.
Bless you.
God bless you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast conversation and that it fed you in some way to pursue your own dreams. Be sure to subscribe to Zayla Mag at zaylamag.com, SEELEMAG.com, where you'll be automatically entered to win our giveaways. And follow us on Instagram at Zayla Magazine, SEELE Magazine. Till next time.